Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Chairman. And first off, congratulations on a very good year. As you said earlier, the numbers were very good, and you met expectations, and we appreciate that. And that's pretty much the direction I'm going to go. As you notice, appropriation hearing. So our concerns, of course, are the numbers we have in our budget. Are they attainable? Can we get there? Will we continue to get there in the future? And I apologize in advance because I'll be honest with you, we have so many different forms, so many different numbers, so many different sources, and I just want to make sure where we're at to make sure that we can meet what we have in our budget. To start with, you have provided us with an updated worksheet that was mailed to us. You had one in your original one in your booklet, in your budget booklet, and then you provided us an updated one. And with that, a letter accompanying it says, explaining the changes is the columns pertaining to liquor purchases and LCB expenses have been updated for fiscal year 16-17 to reflect the numbers contained in the fiscal year 16-17 executive budget for sake of consistency. Now, for sake of consistency, I really would need to figure this out, and I hope maybe you can clarify this for me. On your report, the updated report for sake of consistency, the number for cash, beginning balance of cash, is $210 million. On the governor's report, which we're supposed to be consistent with, page 876 shows beginning cash of $40 million. Can you, also going back to last year's numbers would reflect approximately the $40 million. What I need to understand is, where did the extra $170 million come from?
That's John.
One of the things we learned at last year's hearing, when that fact was pointed out to us, we generate financial statements like a public business does. We have cash flow statements, income statements, and balance sheets. In the cash flow statements is a true reflection of the cash situation of the agency, both cash and short-term investments. We've been well over $200 million. In fact, as of January, we were at $293 million. That was after paying the first $50 million to the state, back to the general fund. That is a true reflection. Our understanding of what happens when it goes to the governor's office is they make changes to it, number one, to fit the SAP system they have. Number two, they liquidate the inventory assets, and they change what would be a normal financial sheet to align with the way they handle all the state agencies. And I'm not real literate on how they do that, but they make a change to it. And so what we attempted to show you in that document is what the comptroller issues, the $200 million that you're referencing, which is now $293, is the way business would look at their running their business, and not the way the state reports it to fit it in with other agencies that are nothing but cost centers. They don't make any money.
And you can't understand our confusion here.
I certainly do. And we were confused a year ago.
I know we were, because we had this conversation a year ago, and I wasn't sure then. I'm still not really sure right now, to tell you the truth. The $210 million, or 293, as you said, we're at right now. Is there any encumbrances to that? Is there any payables that should be offset against that? Or
certainly, in any balance sheet, there's going to be payables for inventory, various accounts payable. On the liability side, those are very normal. So that, and we're happy to go through that with the comptroller issues every month, showing that.
Okay. Following through on some discussions we had last year as well, our biggest variable, it seems, is our LCB expenses. The growth of your LCB expenses. You've met your revenue growth. You've told us 4.2 or 4%. You've been hitting that, and that's what you projected forward as well. This year, last year in our discussions, you had anticipated growth of LCB expenses of 6.5% going forward. And in fact, in 14-15, the growth was 6.9% in expenses. In 15-16, you're projecting 7.75%. Now for 16-17, you're only showing a 4% growth in expenses. Now, I hope that is the case, but I would really like to know what took place that you were able to knock those numbers down.
I think so.
And in fact, the first iteration we had on your cash receipts and disbursements showed growth in LCB expenses of 5%. So now it's down, we got another one, and now it's down 4% growth. So I'm just, what cost-saving measures took place? What happened?
Well, I think there's a lot of questions there, and I'm going to try to answer it as best I can. I think everybody's aware that at the fiscal year end last June, we were hit with 3 different accruals charges, OPEB, pension, and workers' comp that were substantial that we were not anticipating. So that had a very negative accrual effect on our net income. It was not a cash effect, but it was an accrual effect, and that bill will have to be paid someday. We understand that. Going forward, we've had to budget increases for the fiscal year we're in and then next fiscal year based on the budget office's direction on where pension and those 3 categories are going. We have done, I think, on the non-personnel part of our cost, done a magnificent job. The year we're in right now, we're anticipating, is it 5.3%, or is that last year? Last year. Let me just, for reference, last year, the operating expenses of the agency went up 5.3%. The 5.3% included the pension, the increased cost, but not the accrual. So even though our pension was going up substantially, which we budgeted for, OPEB and these other workers' comp, of that, only 1.7% was actually non-personnel related, if that makes sense. There's a lot of numbers here.
Yeah, and I do understand. My issue is we were projecting expense growth of 6.5% annually going forward. Now we're only projecting 4% expense growth. I just want to make sure that we're going to have the dollars necessary to meet the obligations that we're put into our budget. And so that reduction, what made you in your budget reduce what you thought your increases were going to be?
We're doing what any business would do, sir, which is we're implementing programs to reduce our expenses. It was mentioned before, PLCB Plus, which is the new licensing system. We're anticipating next fiscal year $1 million internal reduction of cost in the agency. By year 4, that grows to $9 million because it's an online system replacing a lot of manual work that goes on for our licensees. We have some of the information we provided details some of the initiatives we're doing working with DGS to reduce costs. So while we are incurring these increased personnel costs, and we understand fully that, we are working diligently on the non-personnel side to reduce our costs across the board.
Also, in your original report, the budget report that you sent to us, you always included a long-term outlook. It always went out 5, 6, 7 years. I think it went out to 2021 originally. And in your updated report that you sent to us last week, it eliminated the out years. You just have 16, 17. And the reason you listed for the change, for eliminating those, estimated columns for 17, 18 through 2021 have been deleted, given the uncertainty and ever-changing nature of the allocation of the PLCB's share of the overall actuarially determined unfunded Commonwealth liability for employee benefits. So essentially, you cut out the last 4 years, which I think are integral to us to make decisions as far as budgeting. You couldn't have just done it on today's assumptions of knowing what today's numbers are and what today's rules are?
Well, I think the reason we didn't do it, I know the reason we didn't do it, it becomes more and more difficult because we are not sure if we're going to get legislative relief. We're not sure if we don't get it. If we get it, we're not sure what other expenses are going to come in, so it gets harder to predict. Again, I get back to pricing. We believe that's where there's great opportunity for growth, but it's difficult to project years out if you don't know legislatively what you're going to get. And that's what we did last year. We anticipated receiving legislative help, and we didn't get it. So that was the reason for caution.
One of the tough. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I'd add that the OPEB and workers' comp issue, as well as the pension liability. I mean, all of those costs that came and cost. I think they cost like $49 million, came to us not in fiscal year 14-15, but came to us in the October timeframe. Mm-hmm. So we didn't even know what charges were going to go against us until that time frame. The budget office and the comptroller have no idea in terms of what those accruals are going to be. And if they don't have an idea, it's hard for us to pass that along and pass that information along to you. We'd like to be accurate in our information and not be just taking a stab at it. And so in this way, we feel that we're pretty sure what's going to happen in the next 12 months, but it's almost impossible to go beyond that. And I'd rather give you accurate information than inaccurate information.
And I appreciate the attempt of accuracy, but it's also very prudent for us to do planning on the long range, and we need to understand, are you going to be able to make the transfers that we have scheduled out for the next 3 or 4 years? Along those lines, we talked a little bit about consumer convenience concept, and the chairman was kind enough to go through the list of different things. And we've tried to put together, based on the discussions that you've had with our staff, as well as what you said here today, of what type of revenue enhancements we're talking about there. What's the dollar figure that goes with it? And do you have a total in mind yourself for 16, 17? A dollar figure?
From the enhancements?
Yes.
$100 million.
$100 million? Okay, we came up with $97 million, and that's a revenue enhancer. That's how many additional dollars of revenue. There also will be some expenses associated with that, would there not?
Certainly.
Some additional expenses if you're open on Sundays?
Yes, that is the net number we came out with
Okay.
after the expenses in IT or personnel.
Okay,
Yes.
that is really what I was trying to get at.
net.
Is that the net number after expenses? In that regard, in the governor's budget, executive budget on 876, he shows an additional transfer of $100 million coming out in 16-17, and that's in our budget. In your schedule, you kind of put it down at the bottom of the schedule. It's really not showing as a disbursement. Were your anticipation to be able to make that transfer?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Assuming we get the...
Assuming we get the...
Assuming that sometime, and the time frame for that having to be done would be
It would be the beginning of the fiscal
July-
year.
beginning of
July 1.
July 1. Also, in discussions, my understanding is that in future years, that number, that $100 million additional revenue enhancement, is supposed to grow to $185 million in future years. Is that correct?
Well, as I stated, it's difficult to project going forward, not knowing what's going to be the law, not knowing what's going to be the ability of pricing and so forth. But I personally believe that if we were to be able to implement fully the legislative assistance we need and other ideas that we have, I believe that we could grow. I personally believe that we could grow to $185 million in transfers.
Okay.
And Representative, that's where the chairman and I disagree. I think that's a stretch. I think that there's an awful lot of things that would have to fall in place for that to occur. But as far as reaching the $185 million in additional revenue, I'm not on board for that.
And I appreciate your candor, because that is really what we're trying to get to, is understanding where we're going to be budget-wise going forward with whatever changes that could potentially materialize. And I do share your opinion, to be honest with you. I'm not, even if it's legislatively enacted, I'm not entirely comfortable on $100 million, to be honest with you.
I'm comfortable with the $100 million. Again, depending upon the timing of everything, it's moving forward past that year.
Right.
I'm not. I'm just not.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your answers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.